Part 1 of the Krell Dominion had never known defeat. For over 200 cycles, their silver warships had cut through the stars like blades through silk. Planet after planet fell beneath their boots. Their weapons burned cities to glass. Their laws rewrote cultures into silence. They believed themselves the peak of order in a chaotic universe. And so, when their scouts returned with data on a distant world called Viridia, marked in old human records as a Class 15 death world, they laughed. Death world. What a dramatic word. To the Krell, it sounded like fear dressed up as science. Their own worlds were harsh. Tidal-locked moons with acid rains, gas giants with floating fortress cities, but they had tamed them all. Surely this muddy blue-green dot orbiting a quiet star was no different. The reports mentioned strange flora, aggressive fauna, and unstable weather, but the Krell had seen worse. Besides, their sensors had picked up rich deposits of lumina crystals beneath Viridia's crust, rare minerals that could power entire fleets for decades. That was reason enough. Fleet Commander Vexor stood on the command deck of the warship Iron Maw, his clawed fingers resting on the obsidian rail. His scales shimmered a deep violet, the color of high command. Around him, officers moved with mechanical precision, reporting readiness, fuel levels, weapon calibrations. Everything was perfect. Everything was under control. "Launch the first wave," Vexor ordered, his voice low and smooth like grinding stone. "Yes, Commander," replied Lieutenant Zara, his science officer. She was young for her rank, sharp-eyed and cautious. She had studied the old Terran files more closely than the others. Something about Viridia unsettled her. The classification wasn't just about danger. It was about unpredictability. But she said nothing. Questioning orders was not the Krell way. Hundreds of dropships peeled away from the motherships, streaking toward the planet like falling stars. Inside each, squads of shock troops sat in silence, their exosuits humming softly. They carried plasma rifles, sonic disruptors, and neural nets for capturing live specimens. They expected resistance, maybe a few primitive human militias with outdated guns. They did not expect the sky to fight back. As the dropships entered Viridia's upper atmosphere, static crackled across every comms channel. Navigation systems flickered. One ship veered sharply off course, vanishing into a swirling storm cloud that hadn't been on any forecast. Another lost engine power and spiraled toward a mountain range blanketed in violet fog. On the surface, Eli Carter wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. He was 23, lean from years of hard work, with sun-bleached hair and eyes that had learned to read the land like a book. He knelt in a field of silver-stalked grain, checking the roots for signs of blight. The plants here weren't like earth crops. They had evolved thick, rubbery skins and deep taproots that drank from underground rivers laced with minerals that would poison most life. But Eli's people had learned. They'd been on Viridia for 6 generations. They didn't conquer the land. They listened to it. A low rumble rolled across the sky. Not thunder, too rhythmic. Eli froze. He knew that sound. It was the same one his grandfather had described from the last off-world visit, decades ago. Engines. His heart pounded, but he didn't run. Instead, he pressed his palm flat against the warm soil. Through the mycelial network, the living web of fungi that connected every plant on Viridia, he felt a ripple of alarm. The planet itself was reacting. He stood quickly and whistled 3 short notes. From the tree line, his sister Mara appeared, her medkit slung over one shoulder. She was older by 2 years, with steady hands and a calm voice that could soothe even the most terrified child. Her eyes followed his gaze upward. "Ships," she said quietly. "Not ours," Eli replied. They didn't have time to wonder who they were. A distant explosion shook the ground. Then another. Smoke rose in the distance, thick and black. But it wasn't fire that worried them. It was the silence that followed. No distress calls. No human voices on the emergency band. Just wind and the low hiss of something burning that shouldn't be burning. In the Krell dropships, chaos unfolded. The air outside was thick with microscopic spores that clung to suit seals and ate through polymer like acid. One soldier's visor fogged, then cracked as a burrowing creature, no bigger than a hand but with jaws like steel wire, squeezed through a seam and latched onto his neck. He screamed, but the sound was cut short as his suit depressurized. Another squad landed in what looked like a meadow. Beautiful even. Flowers glowed softly in the twilight. But when they stepped forward, the ground gave way. Not mud, something alive. Tendrils shot up, wrapping around legs, pulling them down into a pit of digestive slime. Their plasma rifles overheated in the humid air and exploded in their hands. Back on the Iron Maw, alarms blared. Red lights pulsed across the bridge. "Commander," Zara said, her voice tight. "We've lost contact with 70% of the first wave. Environmental readings are inconsistent. Gravity shifts. Electromagnetic surges. Atmospheric composition changes by the minute." Vexer's tail twitched. "Inconsistent? That's impossible. Run diagnostics." We did. "The sensors are working. It's the planet. It's changing." He turned to her, eyes narrow. "Planets do not change on command." "This one does," she whispered. On the surface, Eli and Mara moved fast. They weren't soldiers, but every Viridian knew how to survive. They grabbed their packs. Eli's filled with signal flares made from crushed beetle shells, Mara's with antivenom and healing moss, and ran toward the nearest settlement. Along the way, they passed a Krell dropship, half buried in a marsh. Its hull was already covered in fast-growing vines that pulsed faintly as if feeding. Mara stopped. "They're not from the Alliance. Not traitors, invaders," Eli nodded. "And they picked the wrong world to invade." High above, Vexer stared at the planet on the main view screen. It looked peaceful. Blue oceans, green continents, white clouds drifting lazily. But the data told a different story. His finest troops were dying not in battle, but in confusion. Not by bullets, but by things they couldn't name. For the first time in his life, Vexer felt something unfamiliar. Not fear. Krell did not feel fear, but doubt. He had assumed Viridia was just another rock to be claimed. Now he wondered if the rock had been waiting. Down below, Eli lit a flare. Its green light shot into the sky, visible for miles. All across Viridia, other flares answered. In villages, in caves, in treetop watchtowers, people looked up. They knew what it meant. Strangers had come, and the land would not welcome them. Part 2. The Krell shock troops who survived the landing were not prepared for what came next. Their exosuits, designed for vacuum and radiation, buckled under Viridia's wet heat. Filters clogged with spores that pulsed with slow green light. Joints seized as vines crept into seams and hardened like bone. One soldier tried to call for extraction, but his comms unit fizzed and died. Its circuits shorted by a rain that tasted faintly of metal. They had trained for war against armies, not against the air they breathed or the ground beneath their feet. When they fired their plasma rifles, the humid air turned the beams into sputtering arcs that scorched their own ranks. When they tried to dig in, the soil shifted, swallowing gear and boots alike. And always, always, there were eyes watching from the trees, human eyes, calm and knowing. Eli moved through the canopy like a shadow. He wore no armor, only a tunic woven from spider silk and treated with resin that masked his scent. His bow was carved from heartwood, strung with tendon and tipped with arrowheads made from the teeth of sky serpents. He didn't need to see the Krell to know where they were. The forest told him. A snapped twig, a patch of moss recoiling from alien boots, the low hum of failing tech. He signaled to two others, a boy named Jace and a woman named Lena, using hand signs passed down for generations. They fanned out, silent. Below, 5 Krell soldiers huddled near a wrecked lander, trying to restart a comms relay. Their movements were stiff, panicked. One kept glancing at the sky, expecting rescue that wouldn't come. Eli nocked an arrow. Not to kill, not yet. He aimed for the relay's power core. The shot flew true, striking with a soft thud. A moment later, blue sparks erupted from the device, then silence. The Krell shouted in their guttural tongue, scanning the trees. But the humans were already gone, melting back into the green. Mara was elsewhere, near the edge of the toxic marsh where the first dropship had crashed. She carried a satchel of herbs, bandages, and a small scanner that could read alien biology, salvaged from an old survey drone. She'd found a Krell pilot half buried in mud, his leg pinned under twisted metal. His suit was torn and his skin, scaled and gray, was blistered from contact with the water. She could have left him. Many would have. But Mara was a healer. That didn't change because the patient wasn't human. She knelt, ignoring the hiss of warning from a nearby frog the size of a dog. It watched her with golden eyes but didn't attack. The marsh knew her. The Krell pilot flinched as she approached, raising a weak hand. His weapon was gone. His eyes were wide with pain and fear. "I'm not here to hurt you," Mara said, though she knew he wouldn't understand. She tapped her chest. "Mara." Then she pointed to him, questioning. He hesitated, then rasped, "Core." She nodded. Working quickly, she injected a neutralizing agent into his leg, a mix of viridian fungi and distilled rainwater that countered the marsh's toxins. His breathing slowed. She wrapped the wound in moss that would keep infection away. Then from her wristcom, she played a short recording. It showed a Krell scout vehicle that had rolled into the eastern jungle 2 days earlier. At first nothing happened. Then from the undergrowth came a swarm of beetles, small, metallic, clicking. They climbed the vehicle, prying at seams with sharp mandibles. Within hours the machine was stripped bare, its metal repurposed into glittering nests hanging from the trees. Kor watched, stunned. He pointed at the screen, then at the ground, then at the sky. "This planet, alive?" Mara nodded. "It doesn't hate you. It just doesn't care if you live." Aboard the Iron Maw, Commander Vexer paced the command deck like a caged beast. Reports kept coming, fragmented, desperate. Squad Gamma reported their weapons corroding in minutes. Patrol Theta vanished near a river that sang and pulled them under. A drone sent to map the area returned covered in a sticky film that ate through its hull before it could dock. "Impossible," Vexer growled. "A planet cannot be sentient." "It doesn't need to be," Zara said, her voice quiet but firm. She stood before a holographic display showing Viridia's biosphere in real time. "Look, the spore clouds shift when we move ships. The predator packs appear only near our landing zones. The magnetic fields spike during our transmissions. It's not thinking, it's reacting. Like an immune system," Vexor stopped. "You're saying we're a disease." "I'm saying the planet treats us like one." He turned away, claws digging into the rail. This was not how conquest was supposed to go. There should be cities to burn, leaders to kneel, resources to claim. Instead, they were being erased by rain and roots and things that crawled in the dark. Down on the surface, the humans did not celebrate. They knew the Krell would not give up easily. They gathered in hidden clearings, elders speaking in low voices. Children were sent to higher ground, to caves lined with breathing moss that filtered toxins. Every able person was given a task, some to lay traps, some to guard water sources, others to watch the skies. Eli met Mara at the old stone well, its rim worn smooth by centuries of hands. She told him about Kor, about the recording, about the look in the alien's eyes when he understood. "They'll send more," Eli said. "They always do," Mara replied. That night the wind changed. It carried a scent like burnt sugar and iron, Viridia's way of warning. The root network, the vast fungal web beneath the soil, pulsed with urgency. A new wave was coming, bigger, angrier. The Krell launched their second assault at dawn. This time they sent heavy walkers, mechanical giants with plasma cannons and shielded cockpits. They rolled through the lowlands, crushing trees, flattening fields. For a moment it seemed they might succeed, but Viridia had its own giants. As the lead walker crossed a dry riverbed, the ground trembled. Not from engines, from something waking up. Massive root tendrils thick as tree trunks and black as obsidian burst from the earth. They wrapped around the walker's legs, snapping metal like twigs. The machine listed, then fell, its cockpit cracking open. Before the pilot could eject, vines slithered inside and pulled him out, gentle but firm, like the planet was curious. The other walkers halted. Their sensors overloaded, the air filled with a low, resonant hum, the sound of the planet itself vibrating in warning. Eli watched from a ridge, heart pounding. He had never seen the deep roots rise before. His grandmother had told stories of them from the early days when the first colonists tried to clear forests for farms. The land had fought back then too. Now it was fighting for them. Back on the Iron Maw, Zara played the footage of the walkers fall over and over. She saw how the roots moved, not randomly but with purpose. How the vines avoided harming native life. How the humans stood nearby unharmed as if the planet knew them. She turned to Vexer. "We cannot win this war." He glared at her. "We do not retreat." "We do if we wish to live," she said. "This isn't a battlefield. It's a test. And we are failing." Below, Mara helped Kor to his feet. He was weak but steady. He looked at the fallen walker, then at the humans gathering around it, not to loot, but to guide the trapped pilot to safety. "You protect even your enemies," he said in broken words, pieced together from her earlier lessons. Mara smiled faintly. "We protect life, even when it doesn't deserve it." High above, the Krell fleet hung in orbit, silent now. No more dropships launched. No more orders barked. Only the hum of engines and the growing dread that they had made a terrible mistake. They had come to invade a world. They had walked into a living trap, and the planet had only just begun to wake. First, apart at Throne, the Krell did not retreat. Pride would not allow it. Instead, they chose fire. From orbit, Commander Vexer ordered the deployment of terraforming disruptors, massive satellites designed to break down hostile ecosystems and replace them with Krell-friendly environments. On other worlds, these machines had turned jungles into deserts and oceans into dry basins in a matter of days. Viridia, they believed, would be no different. The satellites dropped from the belly of the Iron Maw like metal seeds. They hummed as they fell, unfolding wings of solar collectors and emitters that glowed red-hot. Once activated, they would flood the atmosphere with ionizing pulses, kill off native life and pave the way for Krell colonization. But Viridia had its own weather. As the satellites entered the upper layers of the sky, a sudden magnetic storm erupted, unpredicted, violent, and focused. Lightning arced between clouds and spirals, not bolts. The disruptor's guidance systems failed. One spun wildly and crashed into a mountain of black glass. Another was caught in a wind current so strong it tore the machine apart before it could power on. The few that landed intact activated their emitters. A low drone filled the air as they began to pulse. Trees nearby withered. Birds fell from the sky. For a moment, it seemed the Krell had found a way. Then the forest answered. From the soil, thick mats of moss surged upward, covering the disruptors in seconds. The moss wasn't ordinary. It was laced with microscopic crystals that absorbed energy. The red glow of the emitters dimmed, then died. Within hours, the machines were overgrown, silent, and half-buried. Vines curled around their frames, pulling them deeper into the earth as if the planet was digesting them. Aboard the Iron Maw, Vexer watched the feed cut out one by one. His claws dug into the armrests of his command chair. "Scramble the orbital drones," he ordered. "Target the northern continent. Burn it clean." The drones launched, small, fast, and armed with focused plasma beams. They streaked toward the surface, aiming for forests, rivers, anything that moved. But Viridia's ionosphere had shifted again, bending light and distorting signals. The drones' targeting systems locked onto false echoes, heat signatures from geothermal vents, reflections off crystal flowers, even the body heat of migrating sky serpents. One drone fired at a herd of six-legged grazers. The beam struck a rock formation instead, which exploded into a cloud of glittering dust. The dust rose, caught the wind, and coated the drone's sensors. Blind, it crashed into a lake that instantly dissolved its hull with acidic water. Another drone targeted what it thought was a human settlement. It was actually a colony of hive mounds built by burrowing insects. The plasma blast triggered a chain reaction. The mounds released a gas that ignited on contact with heat. The explosion sent a firestorm rolling across the plain, but it burned only alien material. The native plants, coated in fire-resistant sap, stood untouched. Eli stood on a high bluff watching the chaos unfold. He held a small device in his hand, a seed pod no bigger than his palm. It pulsed faintly, warm to the touch. This was the humans' answer. Not to fight the Krell directly, but to let the planet do it for them. He turned to Lena and Jace. "It's time," they nodded. From hidden caches across the land, Viridians emerged. Men, women, even children carried similar pods. They didn't throw them like weapons. They placed them gently on the ground, near Krell wreckage, near scorched earth, near the edges of poisoned streams. Then they stepped back. The pods opened slowly, releasing clouds of fine, silver pollen. The wind caught it instantly, carrying it high into the sky, toward the stranded Krell ship still trying to hold position in the turbulent atmosphere. Mara was with Kor near the edge of the marsh. He watched the pollen rise, confused. "What is that?" "Hope," Mara said. The pollen wasn't poison. It was a catalyst, on contact with metal and energy, especially the kind used in Krell technology. It triggered rapid crystalline growth. Within minutes of touching a Krell hull, the spores began to multiply, forming a lace-like moss that fed on electromagnetic fields. It spread silently, covering sensors, clogging vents, leaching power from fusion cores. On the Iron Maw, alarms blared again. "Commander!" an officer shouted. Hull integrity failing on decks 7 through 9. Unknown organic growth spreading across the outer shell. Vexer rushed to the nearest viewport. Outside, his once pristine warship was being veiled in shimmering silver threads. They pulsed with soft light like veins carrying starlight. Worse, the ship's power levels were dropping. Lights flickered. Gravity plates stuttered. Zara ran calculations on her console, her face pale. It's using our own energy against us. The more we power up, the faster it grows. Below, Eli watched as a Krell dropship tried to lift off. Its engines roared, but the silver moss had already wrapped around its thrusters. With a groan of stressed metal, the ship tilted and collapsed back to the ground. Roots from the earth rose to meet it, embracing the wreck like an old friend. The humans did not cheer. They simply turned and walked away, back to their fields, their homes, their lives. They knew the planet would finish what they had started. Kor looked at Mara, his voice quiet. Your people. You don't fight like soldiers. No, she said. We don't have to. We live here. That's enough. Night fell. The sky, usually alive with twin moons and drifting auroras, was now streaked with the dying lights of Krell vessels. Some drifted aimlessly. Others listed sideways, half swallowed by the land. The air smelled of ozone and blooming night flowers. In a hidden valley, elders gathered around a fire made from dried fungus that burned without smoke. They spoke in low tones, not of victory but of balance. They knew the Krell might return one day with better weapons, smarter plans. But they also knew Viridia would be ready. Eli sat apart, sharpening an arrow. He thought of his grandfather, who had once said, "The strongest thing on this world isn't the biggest predator or the deepest root. It's patience." Mara joined him, handing him a cup of warm broth. "They'll try to run soon," she said. "Let them," Eli replied. But the sky won't let them go. As if on cue, a deep rumble rolled across the heavens. Not thunder, something deeper. The gravimetric eddy had tightened. The Krell fleet was caught in a natural trap, a knot in space-time woven by Viridia's strange core. Their engines strained against it, but the more they fought, the tighter it pulled. On the Iron Maw, Vexer finally understood. They were not invaders. They were guests who had broken every rule. And the host had locked the doors. Zara stood beside him, her voice barely a whisper. "We should have listened to the old records." He said nothing. For the first time, the weight of his mistake pressed down heavier than any gravity well. Outside, the silver moss glowed brighter, feeding on the fear and power of a dying fleet. And far below, the humans slept, safe in the arms of a world that protected its own. Part 4. The Krell fleet was trapped. Not by weapons, not by walls, but by the sky itself. Viridia's upper atmosphere had twisted into a slow, invisible whirlpool of magnetic currents and gravity tides. Every time a ship fired its engines to break free, the eddy pulled it deeper, like a hand closing around a struggling insect. Power drained faster than it could be replaced. Lights flickered across the hulls. Comms went silent, and the silver moss, now thick as fur, pulsed with stolen energy, glowing brighter with every passing hour. Commander Vexer stood alone on the observation deck of the Iron Maw. His reflection in the glass looked hollow. Scales once proud and sharp now seemed dull. He watched as a support vessel listed sideways, its stern vanishing into a bank of violet cloud. No explosion, no fire, just quiet surrender to the planet below. He had come to claim a world. Instead, the world had claimed him. On the surface, Eli walked through a field where a Krell command pod had crashed the night before. The pod was already half covered in vines that shimmered with dew. He didn't touch it. He didn't need to. The land was doing its work. Nearby, children played a quiet game, using fallen Krell comms chips as tokens. They weren't afraid anymore. Fear had turned into curiosity, then into understanding. Mara was in the healing grove, tending to Kor. His wounds were healing faster than expected. Viridian moss and clean water did wonders even for alien biology. He sat upright now, watching the sky with new eyes. He no longer saw a battlefield. He saw a living system, vast and ancient, that had simply defended itself. "They will try to send a distress call," Kor said softly. Mara shook her head. "The storms block long-range signals. And even if they got one out, who would come? No one sane would fly into this." Kor looked down. "My people. They do not believe in lessons, only in force." "Then they'll keep losing," Mara said, not unkindly. High above, Zara worked frantically in the science bay. She had rerouted power from non-essential systems, trying to keep the main comms array alive long enough to send one final message. Not a plea for help, but a warning. She typed with steady fingers, choosing each word carefully. Do not come here. This is not a planet. It is a gauntlet. And humanity, they are its champions. She hesitated, then added one more line. Survival is not weakness. It is the highest form of strength. Before she could send it, the console sparked. The Moss had reached the outer hull near the antenna array. Power failed. The screen went dark. She sighed, but did not panic. Panic was useless now. She gathered her notes, handwritten on recycled foil, and tucked them into her belt. If she died, she wanted someone to know what happened. Not as a defeat, but as a truth. On the bridge, Vexer finally gave the order he had refused to speak until now. Prepare evacuation shuttles. All non-essential personnel. Abandon ship. Murmurs spread among the officers. Abandon ship meant admitting failure. In Krell history, no commander had ever done so and lived to face the High Council. But Vexer no longer cared about the Council. He cared about the lives still breathing on his vessel. The shuttles launched one by one, small and fast, aiming for the thin edge of the atmosphere where the eddy was weakest. But Viridia was not done. As the first shuttle climbed, a flock of sky serpents, normally solitary hunters, rose from the canyons in perfect unison. They didn't attack. They simply flew in tight formation around the shuttle, their wing beats creating harmonic vibrations that scrambled the guidance systems. The shuttle veered off course and vanished into a storm cloud. The second shuttle made it higher, but then the air itself seemed to thicken. A sudden pressure drop caused the hull to groan. Cracks appeared. It tumbled back toward the surface, trailing smoke. Only one shuttle, the last and smallest, broke through the upper layers. It limped into stable orbit, engines sputtering. Aboard it, 5 Krell survivors, including Zara, watched through cracked viewports as the Iron Maw tilted slowly, majestically, toward the planet below. They did not speak. There were no words left. On the ground, Eli saw the flagship begin its final descent. He didn't feel joy. He felt something quieter, respect. Even enemies deserved that much when they faced the end with dignity. Mara stood beside him. They'll tell others, she said. They'll say this place is cursed. Let them, Eli replied. Fear keeps the foolish away. That's mercy. As the Iron Maw entered the lower atmosphere, the planet welcomed it not with fire but with roots. Great black tendrils rose from the earth like arms, catching the massive ship before it could crash. They cradled it, then began to pull it down, gently into a wide basin lined with glowing fungi. Within hours, the ship would be part of the landscape, its metal recycled, its energy absorbed, its story woven into the soil. Kor watched from the healing grove, tears in his eyes. We thought we were gods, he whispered. But we were just visitors who forgot to knock. Mara placed a hand on his shoulder. Now you know better, night fell again. The twin moons rose, casting silver light over a world at peace. In villages and clearings, people gathered not to celebrate but to remember. They lit small fires made from dried reeds that burned blue, a sign of balance restored. Eli walked alone to the edge of the basin where the Iron Maw now rested. The silver moss covered it completely, turning the warship into a strange, beautiful sculpture. He placed a single seed pod on the ground nearby, a gift, not a weapon. In time, flowers would grow there, feeding on the remains of war. He looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, other fleets might be watching. Other empires might be planning. But tonight, Viridia was safe, and the humans, small and quiet and deeply rooted, knew they would always be ready, because they did not fight to conquer. They lived to endure. And on a Class 15 death world, that was more than enough. Part 5. Years passed. The scars of war faded, not because they were forgotten, but because Viridia healed quickly. The great basin where the Krell flagship had settled was now a quiet grove. Trees with silver bark grew from its hull, their leaves catching sunlight and turning it into soft music. Children played among the roots, climbing over what had once been gun turrets, now covered in moss and blooming night flowers. No one called it a wreck. They called it the Whispering Ship, because on still nights, the wind through its broken corridor sounded like voices telling old stories. Eli was older now, his face lined from sun and wind, but his eyes still sharp. He walked the same fields he had as a young man, though his hands were slower and his steps more measured. He no longer carried a bow but a walking stick carved from the heartwood of a sky serpent's nesting tree. He taught the young ones how to read the land, not just to survive, but to listen. The planet speaks in rustles and shifts of light and the way the beetles move before a storm, he would say. You don't need weapons if you understand the language. Mara still healed. Her hair had streaks of gray, but her hands were as steady as ever. She ran a school now, not just for medicine, but for peace. She taught that even enemies could learn, if given the chance. Kor had stayed. He never returned to the stars. He chose to live among the humans, learning their ways, sharing his own. He helped build irrigation channels that worked with the land, not against it. He taught the children Krell songs, soft rhythmic chants about stars and silence, and in return, they taught him how to weave nets from river reeds and how to calm a panicked sky serpent with a low hum. The Krell who escaped in the last shuttle never came back. But their warning spread. Across the galaxy, in council chambers and war rooms, the name Viridia became a whisper, then a myth, then a lesson. No fleet dared approach. Scouts who flew near the system reported strange readings, gravity shifts, signal loss, clouds that moved against the wind. They turned back. The few who didn't were never seen again. In time, even the Krell Dominion changed. New leaders rose, ones who valued knowledge over conquest. They studied the old logs, the fragmented data, the single message Zara had almost sent. They came to understand that some worlds were not meant to be owned. Some worlds owned you. On Viridia, life went on. Crops grew in soil enriched by fallen star metal. Rain washed clean the last traces of alien oil. The root network thrived, stronger than ever, connecting every living thing in a silent, steady rhythm. The humans did not build walls. They did not stockpile weapons. They trusted the land, and the land trusted them. One evening, Eli sat with Mara on a hill overlooking the valley. The twin suns dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in colors no artist could copy. Below, lights glowed in the village, not electric but bioluminescent lanterns grown from gourds and fed by symbiotic fungi. Do you think they'll ever try again? Mara asked. Eli shook his head. Not here. Maybe somewhere else. But not here. We showed them what happens when you forget to ask before you take. Mara smiled. We didn't show them. The planet did. And we stood beside it, Eli said. That's what matters. Far above, in the silent dark between stars, alien commanders studied old star charts. When they came to Viridia's sector, they marked it not with a flag or a warning symbol, but with a single word, written in every language they knew. Lesson. They did not speak the planet's name aloud. They simply avoided it, like sailors once avoided reefs marked only by the bones of ships. Back on Viridia, a child ran up the hill, breathless. Eli, Mara. The Eastern Grove, it's blooming early. They stood not with urgency, but with quiet joy. The Eastern Grove was where the first Krell dropship had fallen. Every year, strange flowers grew there, petals edged in silver, centers that glowed faintly at dusk. The elders said the flowers were the planet's memory, turning pain into beauty. As they walked down the path, hand in hand like they had as children, the wind carried the scent of rain and blossoms. Somewhere in the trees, a sky serpent sang its evening song. The land was calm. The people were safe. And in the archives of a crumbling empire, long after the Krell Dominion had faded into history, a single phrase remained, etched into stone by those who finally understood. How could you invade a Class 15 death world? Now they knew you couldn't.